Prologue, the warning. If you ever hear a song where no one is singing, run. Not the faint echo of wind. Not the rustle of old wood. Not the murmur of water in the pipes. I mean a hymn. Words you almost recognize. Prayers twisted into melody. Verses soaked in grief. If you hear that, leave. Because the hymn does not come from voices. It comes from walls. I didn't believe the stories when I first heard them. Who would? A chapel abandoned for decades. Burned and cursed. Where people swore the stone itself bled. It sounded like a tale to frighten children. A warning to keep them from wandering too far at night. But the stories were true. I touched those walls. I felt them breathe. I saw blood slide across the stone in perfect rhythm. Each drop striking the floor like the note of an organ no human hand could play. And once you've heard the hymn, it remembers you. It follows you home. It knows your name. People think demons shout, that curses roar. But the hymn does neither. It waits. It hums softly, patiently, until silence itself bends to it. And when you finally join the song, when your name becomes part of the verse, there is no leaving. The hymn does not want your faith. It does not want your prayer. It wants your blood, your voice, your walls. So I am telling you this before it's too late. If you ever hear a hymn bleeding from the walls, do not listen. And above all, do not sing.
Capítulo 1. The First Drop. The first time I heard it, I thought I was losing my mind. The chapel had been abandoned for decades, roof broken in places, benches rotting, candles reduced to stubs covered in dust. And yet, as I stepped onto the cracked stone floor, I heard a hymn, not from a choir, not from a priest, from the walls themselves. It began as a faint hum, low and trembling, like the breath of something buried alive. Then, a sound like dripping water reached my ears. I turned my head toward the left wall and froze. A thin line of red was sliding downward, so fresh it glistened in the dying light. It wasn't paint, it wasn't rust, it was blood. I leaned closer, against every instinct screaming at me to run. The drop swelled, broke loose, and fell, splashing against the stone floor. But when it hit, it did not sound like liquid. It sounded like a note, clear, sharp, the first note of a hymn. The second drop followed, another note, and another. Soon, the wall was bleeding music, each droplet striking the ground like a choir warming its throat in hell. I pressed a hand against the stone, horrified to feel the vibration beneath my skin. The wall was alive, pulsing like a heart. My fingers came away wet, and when I looked, crimson streaked across my palm. The metallic smell rose, but what unsettled me most was the rhythm. The blood was dripping in time, a hymn, a prayer. I stumbled backward, but the music rose, harmonizing. A chorus without throats, without lungs, without mercy. There was no wind, yet the air shivered. My ears throbbed as if pressed against a church organ too large for this ruined chapel. The melody grew familiar, horribly so. It was the hymn my grandmother used to sing when she prayed over the dead. I hadn't heard it in years, but the lyrics clawed at the edges of memory. Lord, receive the souls we cannot save. But no one was singing. The walls bled it. The more I listened, the more my chest tightened, as if invisible hands were wringing the life out of me. I tried to look away, but the stone seemed to move, dark veins spreading, expanding toward me like cracks in glass. And then came the voices. They didn't sing in unison. They screamed through the hymn, hundreds layered upon hundreds. Men, women, children, all crying inside the melody. Their wails were buried inside the prayer like rot beneath perfume. I dropped to my knees, clutching my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't only in the chapel, it was inside me. The hymn was bleeding through my bones, dripping from the marrow. The last thing I saw before I fled was this. The wall swelling outward, as if the stone itself wanted to breathe. In the rising crimson, faint shapes pressed from within, faces straining, mouths open in eternal song. I ran into the night, but the hymn followed. Capítulo 2's The Forgotten Choir. I returned to the chapel the next night, though every part of me swore I never would. Curiosity, or maybe damnation, dragged me back. The hymn still clung to my memory, looping in my head like a parasite. Silence was impossible. I could hear faint echoes in my sleep, humming inside my skull. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. Cold, thick, and damp, as if the chapel were breathing. I struck a match, the flame trembling against the shadows, and there they were, streaks of blood still glistening on the stone walls, though no fresh drop fell. The silence felt heavier than sound. Then it began, a low rumble, deep and distant, as though it rose from beneath the floorboards. The sound swelled until it broke into a chorus, layer upon layer of voices, all bleeding through the stone. This time, it was no simple hymn. It was a choir. I froze. There was no mistaking it. They sang like the choirs of old, voices woven in harmony, each note laced with devotion and grief. But there was something wrong. Too many voices, hundreds, maybe thousands. I felt the vibration in my teeth, in my chest, until my own heartbeat stumbled, desperate to follow their rhythm. The walls shifted under the candlelight, and I saw them, shadows pressed against the stone like trapped insects under glass, shapes of men and women. Heads tilted back as if in song, mouths open wide but filled with blood. Their eyes were sealed shut, their faces pale and stretched, but the hymn poured out through them. My throat tightened. I knew this story, though no one dared to tell it aloud. Decades ago, a choir had burned here. The fire started mid-mass. When they sang their final hymn, the priest locked the doors to keep them from fleeing. He believed their screams were the devil's trick. By the time he realized the flames had swallowed them whole, the chapel was left in ruin, the priest hanged by his own rosary rope. But their hymn never stopped. Now I could hear it all, their devotion twisted into eternal lament. Some voices were pure, angelic, others cracked, shrill, full of agony. Together, they wove a prayer so haunting it made my eyes water. I staggered toward the altar, clutching the bench for balance. The candle flickered out, but the hymn glowed faintly in the dark, each voice a spark in the void. And then, a whisper broke through the chorus, not sung, spoken. A single voice, clear and sharp. "You heard us, now sing with us." My blood froze. The choir fell silent. Every voice, every scream, every note stopped in unison. The silence was worse than the song. And in that silence, the walls bled again. Not downward, outward. Crimson veins spread across the stone, reaching for me, pulsing like veins of a heart eager to claim another voice for the forgotten choir. Capítulo 3, Stains That Move. The chapel had begun to change me. I could feel it. Every step I took away from that place, I carried something back with me, an echo in my chest, a stain beneath my skin. By the third night, I no longer chose to return. My body moved on its own, pulled toward the ruin like iron to a magnet. The hymn was waiting. When I entered, the smell hit me first. Thick iron, raw and wet, as though someone had just slit a throat and left the blood steaming in the air. My eyes adjusted to the dark and I saw the walls again. Not streaked this time, not dripping. The stains had spread wide and jagged, crawling like vines across the stone, and they were moving. At first I thought it was candlelight tricking my vision, but no. The stains pulsed slowly at first, then with rhythm, stretching, curling, coiling into shapes, letters, symbols, ancient crooked Latin inscriptions I couldn't fully read. But I recognized fragments from old missals. Mors, damnatio, agnus sanguinis, death, damnation, lamb of blood. The words bled themselves across the walls, glowing faintly red like wounds opening on flesh. As they wrote, the hymn shifted, bending to match the letters, each syllable corresponding to the strokes of blood. And then I saw it, my name, at the far corner. Beneath the cracked image of a crucifix, the stains twisted into letters I knew too well. My own name scrawled in blood that refused to dry, dripping slowly as if the wall itself had memorized me. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. The hymn deepened, the voices swelling into laughter disguised as song. They knew me now. I was no longer just an intruder, I was being written into the hymn. The walls throbbed, my ears rang, my vision swam as the stains crept further, branching like veins across the ceiling. I tried to run, but the hymn rose violently, slamming into me like a wave. The pews shook, dust fell from the rafters, and within that cacophony, I heard a truth. Those who are written cannot leave. I clawed at my arms, desperate to tear away the sound. My nails dug into skin until I bled, and for a terrible moment, the blood on my hands glowed like the walls, alive, vibrating with the hymn's rhythm. The chapel wanted me. The stains moved again, faster now, forming an archway of blood around the altar. Shapes appeared inside, faces, pressed against the surface as though trying to break through. They mouthed my name, syllable by syllable, until it wasn't just the wall calling me. It was every forgotten soul inside it. And then the crucifix cracked. The figure of Christ leaned forward, bleeding from the eyes, and in the voice of the hymn itself whispered, "Sing and be saved." I ran. But even as I fled into the night, I knew the stains were not done moving. They would find me again. Capítulo 4. The priest without eyes. By the fourth night, exhaustion had devoured me. I hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. The hymn had sunk too deep into my skull, humming beneath my thoughts like a parasite. I'd tried to pray, whispering words my grandmother once taught me, but every prayer turned hollow, the syllables eaten by silence before they reached heaven. That was when I met him. The chapel's door groaned open before I touched it. A figure stepped out, hunched, wrapped in a tattered cassock the color of ash. His steps were steady, though his head tilted as if listening to something no one else could hear. When the torchlight struck his face, I froze. His eyes were gone, not closed, gone. Two hollow sockets stared back at me, black and wet, as though someone had scooped them clean. "Father!" The word slipped from me like a gasp. He lifted a trembling hand, the rosary wound so tightly around his wrist that beads had cut into the skin. His voice was cracked but strong. "You've heard it." The hymn inside me seemed to flare, recognizing his tone. The walls behind us moaned faintly, a sigh of recognition. "You must leave this place," he said, stepping closer. "Do not let the hymn finish. No one survives the last verse." I wanted to ask him how he knew, but something in his face silenced me. His hollow gaze tilted toward the chapel as though it were speaking to him, feeding him words from the void. "They were a choir once," he whispered. "Pure voices, until faith turned them into fire. Now they are neither saved nor damned. They sing to drag others into their eternity." The hymn rose inside the chapel, faint but insistent, like a child begging for attention. My legs trembled. "They called your name, didn't they?" His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That means the wall has chosen you. Soon, you will be written." "No," I breathed, shaking my head. "I won't let it." The priest reached forward and gripped my wrist. His skin was cold, clammy, as if no blood moved beneath it. "You think you have a choice?" I had a choice too. I stayed to silence them. I prayed until my eyes burned away. "Still, I hear them. Still, I serve them." He pulled me close, his sockets inches from my face, and in that hollow void I saw movement, faces, dozens, perhaps hundreds, swirling inside him like smoke trapped in glass, their mouths stretched wide, forever singing. "If you return again," he whispered, "you will not leave." Then he released me. The hymn surged suddenly, pounding against the chapel walls. For a moment I swore the stone bent outward, straining to reach us. The eyeless priest turned back toward the door, lowering his head. And when he spoke again, it was not his voice. It was the hymn itself, echoing from his mouth like a cavern. "One more night, and you will sing with us." I stumbled backward into the dark, my body shaking. But deep inside I knew the truth. One more night was already promised. Capítulo 5. Confession of the Dead. I swore I wouldn't return. After meeting the priest without eyes, after hearing that promise in the hymn that I had only one night left, I told myself I would stay away. I even packed a small bag, ready to flee the town entirely. But at midnight I found myself standing once again at the chapel door. My body betrayed me, dragged by strings I could not see. The hymn was not only in the walls now, it was inside my veins, inside the marrow, and it was pulling me back. When I entered, the chapel was waiting. The pews seemed straighter, the air heavier, as if the building itself had prepared for me. My gaze was drawn immediately to the dark wooden confessional standing crooked at the far side. It should have been empty, abandoned, broken. But as soon as I stepped closer, a voice whispered through the screen, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." The words were wet, thick with blood. My knees buckled. My first thought was that the eyeless priest had returned, but the voice was wrong, higher, trembling, soaked in agony. I burned with them," the voice continued. "But I was not meant to sing. I betrayed them, locked the door, fed the flames. I froze. This wasn't confession. This was a testimony, delivered decades too late. The wood creaked. I pressed my ear against the screen despite every instinct to run. And I heard it then, multiple voices, layered, overlapping, each one dripping with pain. One after another, they confessed. I cursed God as my skin melted. I sang until my throat filled with smoke. I envied the silence of the dead beside me. The confessional filled with their wails. Each voice crawled through the screen, brushing against my ear like cold breath. They were not seeking forgiveness. They were seeking witnesses. The hymn swelled, bursting through the walls as if answering their prayers. The bloodstains began to spread again, pulsing with each confession. Every sin etched itself into the stone like scripture carved in flesh. "Do you absolve us?" the voices cried together. I shook my head violently, pressing my back to the opposite wall. I can't! I'm not a priest!" The hymn grew louder. The confessional shook violently, the wood splitting with cracks. Something inside wanted to come out. Through the screen, a face pressed forward, charred, skin half melted, mouth open wide. Blood dripped from its lips as it whispered directly into me. "Then you will burn with us." The door of the confessional burst open, though nothing human stepped out. Only shadows. Shadows shaped like kneeling figures, all whispering prayers backward, their words slipping into my ears like knives. I stumbled toward the exit, but as I reached the threshold, the eyeless priest's voice boomed from nowhere and everywhere. "Do not flee. Your confession has not yet begun." The door slammed shut behind me, and the hymn began again, louder, hungrier, closer than ever before. Capítulo 6, the Psalms in reverse. That night the hymn did not wait for me inside the chapel. It followed me home. I woke to the sound of it vibrating through my walls, soft at first, like distant chanting, then growing louder until the glass of my window trembled. My breath caught. I hadn't even stepped foot in the chapel, yet its voice had reached my bed. I rose slowly, every nerve screaming to stay still, and pressed my ear to the plaster. The hymn was clearer there, but this time something was wrong. The melody was twisted, backward, as if each word had been unraveled and stitched together in reverse. I couldn't understand the language, but my body did. The moment the syllables touched me, bile surged up my throat. I stumbled to the sink, vomiting red. Blood, not mine, splattered the porcelain like ink. And still, the hymn went on. I grabbed my crucifix from the nightstand and clutched it until my knuckles whitened. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy..." The hymn interrupted. My words melted on my tongue. The crucifix grew hot, burning into my palm. I dropped it, horrified, as the metal sizzled against the floor. Then came the voices, layered within the backward psalm. They no longer sang. They screamed. Their shrieks warped into syllables, too fast, too sharp. Yet somehow I understood them. "He will not hear you. He does not want you." I staggered back, heart slamming in my chest. Shadows began crawling across the walls of my room, long and crooked, bending like broken limbs. They moved to the rhythm of the reversed psalm, twitching with every distorted note. The hymn reached a crescendo. My lights flickered and died. In the darkness, my name spilled from the walls again, backward this time, stretched into a grotesque echo. "Joy, Johan." I covered my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound bypassed flesh and bone. It was inside my skull, clawing at my brain, writing itself on the surface of my thoughts. I collapsed onto the floor, gagging on air that had turned too thick to swallow. Then silence, total suffocating silence. I opened my eyes to find every shadow in the room staring at me, faces half-formed, mouths wide. They swayed together like a congregation, waiting for a priest to speak. And in that silence I realized something worse than the hymn itself. The psalm had not been reversed. I had been reversed. My reflection in the cracked mirror across the room confirmed it. My lips were moving backward, forming words I had not chosen, prayers I did not understand. My own voice joined the chorus, spilling out in a tongue that bled. The hymn had finally made me sing. Capítulo 7, when angels refused to enter. I thought perhaps holy light could drive it away. That night, I carried candles, thick white pillars stolen from the church supply, and set them around my bed like a barricade. I lit each one, whispering a trembling prayer. Their flames wavered but held, and for a brief moment I believed I had carved a sanctuary out of the dark. Then the hymn began again. It seeped through the cracks of my house as if the walls themselves had become the chapel's stone. The notes were soft at first, a gentle weaving of voices that almost sounded beautiful, almost holy. But underneath, a pulse of despair dragged each melody downward, making my stomach churn. I gripped a candle, holding it high as if its light could fight sound. The flame flickered violently, then bent, not upward, but away, as though recoiling from something at the doorway. I turned, breath locked in my chest. The door was still shut, but the air trembled. The hymn swelled louder. The candlelight bent further, leaning toward the windows, toward escape. And then one flame went out. Then another. Not blown, not snuffed. They bent, bowed, and died, as if invisible hands pressed them down. My sanctuary unraveled, one candle at a time, until only the one in my palm remained. It fought hardest of all, its light stretching thin, shrinking small, bending until it nearly broke. That was when I saw it, a faint shimmer above me, like wings unfolding in the air. For a heartbeat, hope flared. Angels. But the shimmer did not descend. It stopped at the threshold, trembling like glass under pressure. The hymn surged, and the shimmer cracked, splintering into dust. Whatever presence lingered there, whatever fragment of heaven dared to answer, fled. Even angels would not enter. I sank to my knees, tears burning down my face. If angels turned away, what chance did I have? The hymn roared now, drowning my thoughts. Clawing inside my chest, the candle in my hand sputtered, shrinking into a mere ember. And in that ember I saw something. Tiny faces writhing, pressed against the fire as though trapped within. They opened their mouths, and though no sound came, I knew what they screamed. Join us. The flame died. Darkness devoured this room, and in the dark the hymn had no restraint. It filled every space, every breath, until I was certain my soul itself was unraveling. And then, from that void, the eyeless priest's voice returned, low and steady. The angels have abandoned you, but we have not. The walls of my house bled. Capítulo 8, the hymn that knew my name. I no longer questioned where the hymn came from. The chapel, the walls, the air, my own bones, it made no difference. By the 8th night, it had become a parasite of my existence, but nothing prepared me for what it did next. It spoke my name. At first I thought it was imagination, a syllable, half buried in the choir, bending itself into sound that resembled me. But then it came again, clear, unmistakable, torn from the chorus like a knife from flesh. John. The voices stretched it, pulled it apart until it became a chant. My name twisted across harmonies, sung by hundreds of mouths I could not see. Each syllable pressed against my skull, as though invisible fingers were carving letters into the marrow. I shouted into the darkness, "Stop!" My voice cracked weak against their flood. The hymn only grew louder. My name multiplied, spilling from every wall, every corner, until the entire house became a throat. My windows rattled, glass quivering as if about to shatter. The floorboards groaned beneath me, trembling in rhythm. Then the blood returned. It leaked from the ceiling, dripping onto my shoulders, warm against my skin. The droplets landed with sound, each one striking in perfect tune with the chant of my name. When I looked up, I saw the stains forming again, letters in crimson, crawling across the ceiling beams. My name scrawled endlessly in blood, circling like scripture written by the damned. I staggered toward the mirror, desperate to confirm I still belonged to myself. But my reflection was not my own. My lips were moving without command. They formed the same chant, my name on repeat, echoing the hymn. My reflection smiled when I did not. It opened its mouth wider and wider, until its jaw cracked and blood poured down its chest, and still it sang me. I stumbled back, heart hammering. I tried to cover my ears, but the hymn was no longer outside. It was inside. My heartbeat had taken on the rhythm. My breath wheezed in time with it. My entire body had become an instrument for their chorus. And then came the whisper, softer than the roar, slipping between the cracks of the hymn. If you are sung, you belong. The mirror shattered. Shards sprayed across the floor, each fragment reflecting me differently. My face twisted, burned, bloodied, yet all of them chanting. 1,000 broken pieces of myself sang in unison, calling me deeper, binding me tighter. I fell to my knees, clawing at my skin as if I could peel my name out of me. but every scratch only drew more blood, and the blood itself hummed with the hymn. No prayer came, no silence followed, only the sound of my name, eternal, unending. I was no longer just hearing the hymn. I was the hymn, Capitolo 9, the Virgin's silent cry. I thought the hymn could not twist anything holier than itself. I was wrong. That night I returned to the chapel, dragged by chains that weren't made of iron but of sound. The hymn was louder there, vibrating through the earth itself, pulling me through the broken doorway as though I were only a guest in my own body. The statue of the Virgin Mary stood at the altar. I remembered her from my childhood, white stone, serene, lips curved in eternal prayer. But now, her face was not serene. The cracks in the stone had deepened, splitting across her cheeks like veins. Her marble eyes glistened, and for a terrible moment I thought it was dew. Then the first tear fell. Not water, not oil, blood. The red trail slipped down her stone face, streaking her lips until it looked as though she wept from both eyes and mouth at once. The hymn swelled as the drops fell, matching her rhythm. Each tear was a note. Each note was a wound. I dropped to my knees, trembling. I wanted to pray, but the words curdled in my throat. Every syllable reversed itself, twisted into something obscene. The Virgin's face tilted, the stone groaning as though bones beneath were straining. Her lips parted, not to pray, but to scream. The sound never came from her mouth, it came from the walls. Her scream became the hymn. It was louder than before, filled with anguish and devotion tangled into one, and within it the choir of dead voices pushed forward, layering their agony over her cry. I covered my ears, but it was useless. The hymn lived beneath my skin now, vibrating through every vein. Then I saw her move. The Virgin's hands, once folded in prayer, slowly unfolded. Her fingers pointed outward toward me. Her stone arms cracked, bleeding black down her wrists. The gesture was not of blessing, it was of accusation. "You belong to them," the hymn translated in my head. The choir roared behind her, their voices splintering the air. Faces pressed outward from the walls, burned, bloodied, broken, and each one mouthed my name again, woven into her cry. I tried to look away, but my body refused. My eyes locked on hers as the statue leaned forward. Blood spilled from her mouth now, running over her chin and dripping onto the altar, where it sizzled like fire meeting flesh. The hymn rose to a shriek, and then silence. Her lips froze mid-cry. The walls stopped vibrating. The choir hushed. For one suspended breath, I believed it was over. But silence was worse, because in that silence, her eyes moved, and she looked directly at me. Capitolo 10, the choir of flies. The silence after the Virgin's gaze haunted me more than the hymn itself. I could not escape it. Even when I fled the chapel, her eyes followed. Marble turned flesh. Blood turned scripture. By dawn, I no longer knew if I had dreamed it or if stone had truly wept and screamed for me. That night I learned the truth. I returned again, though every instinct in me screamed to stay away. The air was thick, pungent, carrying the sharp tang of rot. Inside, the chapel stank of something fouler than blood, something that clung to my throat and coated my tongue with bitterness. At first I thought the pews were moving, but when my candlelight touched them, I saw what writhed there. Flies, thousands of them, their bodies crawling in black waves across wood and stone. They hummed in unison, not random, not chaotic. Their wings beat with rhythm, layering vibrations until they formed a melody I recognized too well. The hymn. My knees gave out. The sound of insects should have been nothing but noise, but it was music, horribly perfect, each note bending into place, each phrase echoing the voices of the damned. And then they began to sing words. The swarm lifted into the air, forming a cloud above the altar. Their buzzing changed pitch, weaving syllables. At first it was gibberish, but then I heard Latin cut sharp against the air. Dominus, damnatio, sanguis, Lord, damnation, blood. The sound pressed into my skull, my teeth rattling, my chest hollow. I wanted to scream, but the swarm stole the breath from my lungs. They circled me, spiraling tighter, until I could see their tiny bodies glowing faintly red as though lit from within. Each fly pulsed like a fragment of a soul. Faces flickered in the swarm. I saw mouths open in song, eyes burned out, bodies twisted. The flies were not insects at all. They were carriers, flesh vessels for the choir that would not die. They dove at me, tiny legs crawled across my skin, my neck, into my hair. I swatted desperately, but the more I struck, the louder the hymn became. They filled my ears, my nostrils, my mouth. I choked as they pressed past my lips, buzzing down my throat. Inside me they sang. I convulsed on the chapel floor, vision fracturing. The swarm's hymn roared through my body, and for one blinding moment I saw the truth. The chapel was not haunted, it was alive. Its walls were veins, its ceiling, ribs, and the hymn was its heartbeat. The swarm lifted suddenly, rushing upward in a torrent. They clung to the Virgin statue, coating her cracked body until she was no longer white stone, but a living, writhing figure of black wings. Her mouth opened, flies spilling outward, and through them she spoke in 1,000 voices. "Your flesh will be our next instrument." I screamed until my throat tore, but the swarm only laughed, an orchestra of wings and blood. Capítulo 11, written in flesh. By the 11th night, the chapel no longer needed its walls to write. It had me. I woke to the sting of fire beneath my skin. At first I thought it was a fever, but when I pulled back the blanket, I saw lines carved across my arms. Not cuts. No blade had touched me. The skin had split on its own, as though something inside was writing its way out. Letters, Latin, curling and sharp, scrawled down to my wrists in bloody script. Sanguis, mortem, vox, blood, death, voice. I staggered to the mirror. My reflection was already reciting the words, lips moving, voice rasping, though my throat was silent. Each phrase carved deeper into my flesh, as though my body were both parchment and ink. The hymn began again, not in the room, not in the walls, but in me. My veins throbbed to its rhythm, my heartbeat fell into its cadence. Every breath forced the melody outward, even though my lips were clenched shut. I collapsed to my knees, clawing at my arms. The blood welled, but instead of dripping, it flowed in deliberate lines. The liquid curved and shaped itself, spreading across the floor in letters that glowed faintly red, as if my very life was desperate to compose the next verse. I tried to scream, but my voice betrayed me. What left my mouth was not mine. It was the hymn, clear, perfect, sung in a voice I didn't know I carried. My chest burned with each note, my ribs vibrating like the strings of an instrument. I wasn't singing, I was being played. And then I saw them. Faces pressed against my skin from the inside, stretching beneath the surface like drowning souls clawing to escape. Their mouths opened and closed, mouthing lyrics as my body carried the sound. My arms writhed, veins bulging, letters spiraling down to my fingers. The eyeless priest's voice returned, echoing inside my skull, though no one stood near me. "You are the scripture now, each verse etched in your flesh, each hymn bled from your marrow. When you are finished, you will not remain." I crawled to the door, desperate to flee, but the hymn bound me. My muscles locked, forcing me upright. My body turned against me. Walking in rhythm to the music, I could not stop. Step by step, it dragged me back toward the chapel. On the threshold, I looked down. The words had spread further, onto my chest, my throat, even my face. My skin was no longer mine. I was a living scroll, a psalm in flesh. The hymn rose, triumphant, and in one terrible moment I understood. The choir had not been trapped in the walls. They had always been waiting for new pages to write upon. Capítulo 12, the last verse. By the 12th night, there was no longer a choice. My body was no longer mine. Every vein sang. Every scar on my skin glowed with words I had never written, yet they belonged to me all the same. I was the parchment, the ink, the choir. But the hymn was incomplete. The walls of the chapel trembled as I stepped inside, dragged by unseen strings. Blood flowed from the cracks in the stone like rivers, pooling around the pews, spelling verses that twisted and rearranged themselves. The eyeless priest stood at the altar, his hollow sockets raised toward heaven as though he could still see. "It is ready," he rasped. The final verse. I tried to resist, to summon the strength to scream, to deny what was being carved into me, but the hymn had written too deep. My voice rose without my consent. I sang. The sound tore out of me in perfect harmony, layered with hundreds of others. The forgotten choir bellowed through my lungs. My body convulsed, ribs cracking with the force of notes that should not exist in human flesh. Each word burned like fire in my throat, yet I could not stop. The Virgin statue bled from her eyes again, but this time she leaned fully forward. her arms spread wide, her scream forming the harmony to my verse. The swarm of flies erupted from her mouth, spiraling into the rafters, their wings droning like 1,000 organs in unison. The walls pulsed, swelling outward, faces pressing against the stone as though trying to break free. I saw them clearly now, the choir of the damned, still burning, still singing, their mouths sewn together by blood and flame. The eyeless priest raised his hands, the rosary biting into his wrist. "Finish it, child," he commanded, his voice both pleading and triumphant. "Sing the last verse, and the hymn will be eternal." My name rang out again, not from the walls this time, but from my own mouth, chanted and stretched until it was no longer a name, but a key. My skin split wider, blood pouring freely, lines of scripture spilling across the chapel floor. I felt it then. The hymn wanted to end inside me. It wanted my death to seal its eternity. But something deeper stirred, a memory. My grandmother's trembling voice, the lullaby prayer she sang when I was a child. It surfaced through the torrent, fragile but alive. With every shred of will I had left, I forced her prayer through my teeth. The hymn screamed in fury. My blood boiled, my skin seared, but still I prayed. Each word of her simple song struck like a hammer against the wall of voices inside me. The choir fractured. Screams bled into silence. The flies fell dead from the rafters, littering the pews like black rain. The Virgin's statue cracked from crown to base, collapsing into shards. The eyeless priest howled, his hollow sockets streaming blood. "You cannot stop it! You cannot unsing what has been written." But the chapel shuddered. The hymn collapsed into discord, the walls crumbling as the faces within shh. Capítulo 3, the forbidden benediction. They buried me in silence. No bells tolled, no choir sang. Only a priest whispered the final words over a coffin no one dared to open. They thought it was mercy, to hide what I had become, to bury the hymn with me. But hymns do not die. I know this because someone came back. The records say he was a young seminarian sent to cleanse the ruins of the chapel. They gave him a book of prayers older than the church itself, a collection of blessings that had been hidden, locked away, forbidden to be spoken. Words too dangerous for ordinary priests. He walked into the chapel long after the walls had collapsed, when the Virgin's shattered face still lay in fragments across the altar. He brought no candle, no cross, only that book. The air was still, heavy with the ash of silence. But silence here was not safety, it was hunger. He opened the book. His lips trembled as he began to read. At first, the blessing shone like light, soft, clean, holy. The ruins seemed to breathe again, dust rising in golden spirals. But then, the ground quaked. Blood seeped through the cracks in the stone once more, spelling words across the floor. Words he should not have known. My words. The hymn stirred. The forbidden benediction had not silenced it. It had woken it. The voices returned. Low at first, then louder, climbing through the air like fire spreading through dry wood. The choir screamed, layering their agony over the holy words, drowning them, twisting them. The benediction became part of the hymn, devoured and rewritten. And then my coffin cracked. The seminarian's prayer faltered as blood seeped from the wood, dripping onto the floor in steady rhythm. My name echoed in the ruin, chanted not by me but by the hymn that had claimed me. I was no longer buried, I was everywhere. The young man dropped the book, his eyes wide with terror. But the hymn had already found him. It wrapped around his throat, pulled the air from his lungs until he gasped, not words, but song. His scream bent into melody, his voice breaking as it was woven into the endless choir. He had tried to bless the curse. Instead, he had given it new verses, and so the hymn bled again, through the ruins, through the earth, through the flesh of anyone foolish enough to enter. The forbidden benediction had not stopped the song. It had made it eternal. Capítulo Portuns, the silence that killed. After the forbidden benediction, the hymn did something no one expected. It stopped. For the first time in years, the ruins of the chapel fell quiet. No voices bled through the stone. No blood dripped from the cracks. Even the air seemed emptied, as though sound itself had been banished. At first, the survivors thought it was deliverance. They crossed themselves, whispered prayers of gratitude, and dared to step inside the place they had feared for decades. But silence is not salvation. Silence is hunger. The first to die was an old woman who wandered too far into the nave. She collapsed without a sound, no gasp, no cry, no thud of her body against the stone. One moment she stood, the next she was gone, her body crumpled like an empty garment. The others ran to her, but their own footsteps vanished before they touched the ground. They screamed, but no noise left their throats. The silence swallowed everything. The chapel had become a void. It spread quickly. Birds in the rafters opened their beaks, but no song came. The trees beyond the ruined walls swayed, but the wind carried no rustle. Even hearts seemed to beat quieter, as if afraid to betray themselves to the stillness. The silence killed not with violence, but with erasure. The second victim tried to pray. His lips moved, his hands clutched the rosary so tightly that beads cracked between his fingers. But no words emerged. His voice collapsed inside him, choking him until his eyes rolled back. Blood trickled from his mouth, but it made no sound as it hit the ground. The survivors fled, yet even outside the silence followed. The world itself seemed stripped bare of noise. No bells rang in the town, no dogs barked. Mothers wailed, but their grief vanished into nothing. And then, at the edge of that quiet, they heard it, faint at first, almost imagined. The hymn, not sung aloud, not bleeding from walls. It lived inside the silence, feeding on it. Every missing sound was replaced with its memory. Every swallowed voice replaced with a note. The more silence spread, the stronger the hymn became, echoing in the minds of all who had once heard it. I felt it most of all. From beneath the soil where my body had been buried, I could feel their terror. My silence was their silence. The hymn used me as its root, drinking from my corpse to bloom into the world. And when the last survivor dared to shout against it, forcing air through his throat until his veins burst, the silence claimed him too. His body fell still, yet I heard him clearly. His scream had joined the song. The hymn was no longer bound to the chapel. The silence was its cathedral. Capitolo Catines, Epilogue, the new wall. They say the ruins are gone now, that the townspeople tore the chapel apart stone by stone, carrying its cursed walls away into the wilderness, scattering them so the hymn would finally fade. But walls do not need stone. I am the proof. They buried me deep, thinking the earth itself could smother the hymn that lived in my veins. But the song does not end with dirt. It seeped through the soil, through the roots of trees, through the foundations of their homes. Every crack became a mouth, every shadow became a throat, and then came the building. Desperate to erase what had happened, they erected a new chapel, a monument of redemption. The walls were clean, the altar polished. The bells hung high to call the faithful back. They thought faith could outbuild memory, but I was already inside. My blood had risen with the stones. Each brick bore a stain invisible to their eyes. Each timber hummed faintly with a note only the dead could hear. They prayed as they built, but their prayers twisted in the air, folding into the hymn, feeding it. On the day of consecration, the townspeople gathered, proud of their work. The new priest raised his hand to bless the altar. He opened his mouth, yet no words came, only silence. The walls trembled. Cracks spread across the plaster, dark veins crawling outward, spelling words no one alive could read. But I knew them. They were mine. Verses etched into my flesh long before I died, now written larger, louder, carved into the skeleton of their sanctuary. The hymn began again, soft at first, like breath against the ear, then swelling until the rafters shook. The congregation clutched their ears, but it was too late. The walls bled from the inside, crimson seeping through the white stone. The hymn had a new cathedral now, one built by the hands of those who thought they could bury it. And in the final note of that first verse I spoke, not with lips, not with flesh, with the wall itself. If you walk past these doors, do not touch the stone. It sings, it remembers, it waits. Now the hymn lives here, endless and patient. Every prayer feeds it, every silence shapes it. Every soul becomes a verse. The old chapel is forgotten, but the new wall bleeds.